Whew, glad I got that out of my system. Moving on. A View to a Kill is indeed a very odd case. Its plotting is sloppy, the tone is all over the place, there are characters in this film that go nowhere, and worst of all, Stacey Sutton is an absolute twit. Seriously, how do you not notice a freaking Zeppelin is looming behind you? I've heard of selective hearing, but this is just moronic. On paper, she's a potentially good character. I say good because Stacey is plucked up into the Zeppelin by Zoran was on paper as well. That's on you, writers. Stacey is a geologist, which they've actually used to carry the story. As far as the performance goes, maybe Tanya Roberts as a geologist was another thing that looked better on paper. Unfortunately, Roberts' flighty, wispy delivery doesn't really sell the character's drive and passion. One thing I will say isn't Roberts' fault is that there is something of an awkward chemistry between her and Roger Moore. A lot of that comes about because of one of the major problems with this movie. It's a problem which you can't really begrudge anyone, quite the opposite actually. You see, at the time Cubby Broccoli was still avidly trying to find a suitable replacement for Roger Moore, Moore wanted to retire the role after For Your Eyes Only. Originally, Cubby was courting Pierce Brosnan to come and take on the role. Unfortunately, Brosnan was still committed to Remington Steele. With no other option to choose from, Moore graciously opted to sign on to be an Octopussy. Unfortunately, it was the same situation here. While you can definitely respect Moore for his dedication, unfortunately his age was showing in more ways than one. So, watching Tanya Roberts getting swifty with someone old enough to be her grandfather came off as creepy, as opposed to the customary sexy. Funny enough, there's a hot tub scene with a Russian agent that comes off even worse. But that wasn't the only action getting hampered by Moore's age. All of the action sequences in this film are wonderfully conceived, but unfortunately the line between actor and stuntman is all too evident here. You can easily tell when Moore's stuntman steps in and seriously takes you out of the movie, which is a shame because the fire truck chase could be amazing, and the image of Bond hanging perilously over San Francisco is a marvel of camera and stunt work, so it's tragic to see these scenes being diminished by a lack of believability that Moore is even doing these stunts. That being said, I'd rather have an older Bond than no Bond at all. So, is there anything good to say about A View to a Kill? 2 words, Walken and Jones. It's not so much the characters that are great, it's just how hilarious it is watching these two. One of the freakishly brilliant actors of all time paired up with a woman who you are positive can not only kick the shit out of Chuck Norris, but she would eat him afterwards, and Chuck would gladly let her. One of my favorite scenes is where the two of them are sparring and they're like two angry wolves. It's just hilarious. You're left with the sublime thought that this is what happens when two nukes collide because the two of them are just amazing. It more than makes up for the inconsistencies in their characters. Max Zorin is a fun bad guy, and he's legitimately menacing. The scene where he's mowing down all the miners is seriously malicious, and you can see the sincere glee on his face as he empties clips into his underlings. Mayday is a cold, efficient villainess, but their character arcs are all over the place. Zorin is a bigger problem, as it seems like in order to make him complex, they throw in a wealth of subplots that go, well, really nowhere. Apparently, he's a genetic experiment from the Nazis, and the presiding scientist still looks upon him as a surrogate son, and for some reason they're doing deals with the Russians. Oh, and he's a technology-driven industrialist bent on dominating the microchip market. Normally, I love complexity when it comes to villains, but seeing as his grand scheme is all in aid of him gaining a monopoly on the software industry, all of this other stuff seems like overcompensating for what they were afraid might be a boring villain. The guy is willing to cause an earthquake to bury Silicon Valley, and it's Christopher Walken. The odds of him being boring are quite slim. Mayday is the opposite problem. Her story is simple and her motivations are clear. The problem is, we don't know anything about her apart from that. It's just fortunate that Grace Jones is strong enough of a presence to make an impression. So, if there was a word to describe A View to a Kill, I'd say sloppy is the most apt. There's moments that are incredibly silly and are an absolute blast to watch, and that's fine for spy films like In Like Flint or the Kingsman films, but this is Bond, and there needs to be a certain level of efficiency and class in their approach, and a bit of organization. Sadly, by and large, this film, well, had a lot going for it, and it really showed, but in the end it amounted to a big mess. That being said, though, Duran Duran for the win!